Hello, everyone, and a pleasant good morning to one and all, and welcome to the June 23rd edition of the Bubb Report. Of course, this intro was a countdown to Grenada's last election that was held on June 23rd, 2 years ago. I'm your humble host, Dr. Kellen Bubb. Now, 2 years ago on this date, the National Democratic Congress swept the polls in a shock result and wrested power from Dr. Keith Mitchell's new National Party, who described his party's loss as disquieting and hurtful. The NNP's loss ushered in a new era in Grenada, with a party betting that its transformation agenda will be the panacea for the laundry list of developmental challenges confronting the very young nation state, which just celebrated its golden jubilee of independence. The new contract with the people of Grenada must still contend with the unfinished business of the past administration, while also implementing its own set of priorities meant to enhance the quality of life of the citizens of the state. Now, as the new administration develops its own style of governance, happening against the backdrop of a cautiously optimistic economic report from the International Monetary Fund, we will sit with Prime Minister, the Honorable Dickon Mitchell, for another extensive conversation on the issues driving Grenada's development and the developmental challenges. This is Prime Minister Mitchell's fourth appearance on the Bubb Report and his second as elected Prime Minister. Mitchell has not shied away from appearing on this platform to be interrogated on behalf of the people and in the interest of fostering the best ideals of a democratic free expression and a free press. Our interview today will be disaggregated into several thematic areas, namely CBI and fiscal management, crime and national security, education and youth development, public administration, health and human development, and public infrastructure. We will conclude our conversation by discussing Global South geopolitics and reparations. It must be made clear that no questions were requested in advance by the Prime Minister's team or his press secretary, making this a no-holds-barred conversation. As you are joining us, please do us a favor by liking and sharing this conversation so that others can watch and listen. We also welcome all of your questions, comments, and feedback in this live conversation. This is the Bubb Report. We will be right back with the Honorable Prime Minister of Grenada, Mr. Dickon Mitchell. Please stand by.
Should your loved ones pass on, they deserve to be treated with dignity. And at S.A. Johnson Funeral Home, we can provide you with that service. We can take you every step of the way during your sorrowful moments. When that need arises, call S.A. Johnson Funeral Home at 347-777-9797. That's 347-777-9797. S.A. Johnson Funeral Home is a Caribbean family-owned funeral home here in Brooklyn, providing funeral services, but in a dignified way. From cremation to burial to the repatriation of your loved ones, you don't have to go through the hassle, as we provide exceptional service that allows you to mourn and heal peacefully. For more information, visit our website, www.sajohnsonfuneral.org. Send us an email at sajfuneral@aol.com or call 347-777-9797. S.A. Johnson Funeral Home, because you deserve to be treated with dignity.
Don't go there.
You are a technocrat. I mean, you can speak to whether or not it was appropriate or inappropriate for that to occur. Would you have done that as a permanent secretary?
Politicians get the information from wherever source that they can.
That's going to be the extent of your answer.
Yeah.
Don't go there.
There's a lot of noise around the data protection bill that, in my respectful view, is not warranted.
I was one of those making noise, and it's simply because I was concerned about that specific Section 33.
Don't go there.
Are you going to be offering yourself up as political leader of the party?
I see you've called me have a much more than diplomatic passport. I don't mind that.
Don't go there.
What is the relationship like between you and your leader, Dr. Mitchell, your boss, Dr. Mitchell?
I'm not sure how to explain how to answer this question at this time. I prefer not to answer.
Don't go there.
They said that you approached the bank for the loan before the election and that it only materialized after the election. There are also conflicting reports around the quantity of monies that were received. What is the reality here?
People try to extort the truth and to make all kinds of things about it. I just stay quiet. So if you notice, I was really and truly quiet about the whole matter.
Except with not with the New Today newspaper. The New Today newspaper reported on this, so I'm not too sure you were quiet on this. Go ahead, Honorable. Go ahead.
Well, I'm just trying to answer your question, right?
Don't go there.
I think we just spoke at length about the regularization framework. So
yes, we did. But let us talk, Prime Minister. Let us talk about the workers who are dismissed.
The Bubb Report. We go there.
And viewers and listeners, welcome back to the Bubb Report. Of course, the promo says we go there, and we do go there. So at this point, I am happy to be joined by my former teacher and a former housemate from Dominican House, the Prime Minister of Grenada, the Honorable Dickon Mitchell. Prime Minister, welcome back to the Bubb Report, sir.
Thank you. Good morning to you, and good morning to all of your faithful and loyal listeners.
Absolutely. Now, Prime Minister, on this day 2 years ago, I'm sure you were in your constituency canvassing and preparing to ensure that voters were going out to the polls 2 years ago, and here we are 2 years later. That probably seems like a lifetime ago.
No, it doesn't for me. It's pretty fresh. The 2 years have gone by quickly. But the reality is that it wasn't a long time ago. So I think I have very detailed memories of what election day was like 2 years ago. And I'm sure there are many citizens of Grenada who also have a very vivid memory of it. So I think we're just happy that we were given the opportunity then to form the government and to work on behalf of the people of Grenada.
Absolutely. Now, what do you and your party have planned for this year's commemoration, a celebration of your second anniversary in office?
This afternoon, we have a family fun day in St. Patrick. It started off this morning with church service, so I'm missing the church service in order to do this interview. And then a little brunch.
Well, thank you for your sacrifice.
And then a little brunch with the cabinet ministers, and then we followed by a fun day that starts at 1 p.m. Really, it's really to bring people together, to spend some time to relax, to reflect, and to rejuvenate. As you're aware, we've also been having a series of town halls that we started in St. Patrick, St. Andrew. We were in Carriacou midweek, and we will be in at the Boca Secondary School on Monday afternoon. And we felt we wanted, in a sense, sometimes it's easy to always have rallies and motorcades and so on, but I think it's also important to sometimes tone things down a bit and to connect with people, to connect with family, to give people an opportunity to speak to one another without the hype and without the noise. And then for us to come back and report to the Grenadian people and to give them the opportunity again to continue the dialogue with us. So we felt it was appropriate really to focus on the town halls, to focus on the family fun day. There was a family fun day in St. Andrew last Sunday as well. So that's sort of how we've chosen to mark the second year anniversary.
Absolutely. And how is the team staying together? What are some team building exercises you have? Of course, public service can induce burnout. I'm sure you know that. So what are you and the team doing to ensure that you can continue to renew, rejuvenate, and re-energize for the service of governance?
Well, thank you. I'm happy you asked that question. Actually, we had a 2-day retreat 2 weeks ago with the cabinet ministers, with advisors. We, in fact, had a facilitating consulting firm, the Tony Blair Institute, who helped us facilitate the retreat as well. We had significant input, particularly from Africa. We had the former chief of staff for the former president of Kenya as being one of the facilitators. We had a former senior civil servant from Canada also being the facilitator. We had the fortune of having a guest appearance by the now Chief Minister of Sierra Leone, who spent some time with us. And so we used the opportunity to bond, to reflect, to engage in some self-criticism, to renew our commitment to the task, as well as to look at how we address delivering on the major challenges that are confronting the country. So we from time to time, I mean, this is one of a couple of retreats we've had since forming the office. We recognize that it's important to engage in training as well, because as you would appreciate, many of us, including myself, have never worked in the public service at all before getting involved in forming the government. And so we know it's important as well to understand the public service, to learn about the service, to engage in self-training, self-learning. So from time to time, we engage in those. Sometimes it is a process involving the permanent secretaries and other members of staff. Sometimes it's a process just involving ourselves. We've also from time to time had engagements with other politicians in the region. So for instance, we had the fortune of having the Prime Minister of St. Lucia, the Prime Minister of Dominica, address the cabinet coming out of our 50th anniversary independence celebration, because they happened to be on island at the time. And we used that as an opportunity to, allow them as long-standing politicians to share their perspective on politics, on the work-life balance, on the balance between being a government minister and a parliamentary representative, and making sure that you appreciate why you're in government and how you're in government, and that it's really constituency that would have put you there. So we engage in all of this. We will continue to do so because it's important to ensure that there's self-growth as well. Several members of our cabinet, as you know, are quite young, and it's important for us to assist with their own career development, their own maturity and growth.
Absolutely. And of course, we'll get to the Africa pivot, but I'm really, really, really loving it. Myself and Comrade Gill were having that conversation. But Prime Minister, of course, before we get into the first theme here, which will be CBI and fiscal management, there are a number of viewers who are watching the Bubb Report in the DMV area, which is the District of Columbia, Maryland, and Virginia, where I'm located. And they're saying that we're not seeing the Prime Minister of Grenada. So perhaps if you can say to
I will
here,
be visiting. I will be visiting. I can't give a definitive answer. We were hoping to try and do so by April. It didn't quite work out though, but I certainly owe a visit to a large extent, contrary to what is sometimes painted. On my travel schedule is usually very limited, very strict, and oftentimes it's in and out purely for the business for which I travel. So
the business of the state, and we will certainly, absolutely. But I just thought I needed to say that.
No, I mean our embassy is in Washington. It's also a permanent representative to the OAS. In fact, the foreign minister will be traveling tomorrow afternoon to attend the OAS meeting. But I've never been to, frankly, outside of New York for the UN General Assembly meetings, and a trip or two to Miami, and oftentimes it's in transit. I have not really visited the United States as Prime Minister.
As much.
Certainly owe Washington a visit, and hopefully I can get this sooner rather than later.
Absolutely, because there are many Grenadians here, many patriotic Grenadians, and one, Miss Liz Dasani, will not forgive me if I did not say that. So I just needed to put that out there, sir. Okay, Prime Minister, let us get into it, sir. Now, CBI and fiscal management. Now, let us talk about the regional pact to create a regional CBI authority and the justification behind creating within the framework of that authority minimum investment threshold cap. Was that perhaps as a response to the posturing by the European Union that there was a need to create this? And talk about that investment threshold cap. Are we saying that investors who are coming in to invest can only invest that particular amount of monies as CBI investors?
No, we're saying that's the minimum, right? So it's a minimum cap. It's the flooring. It's not a ceiling. Okay. So first, it's a minimum of 200,000 US. And that's net, meaning that's the net among the state or the government in any particular 5-member OECS territory that has a CBI programs or investment migration programs is expected to receive once the new price regime goes into effect. So that's the minimum. The quantums above that is completely in the hands of the individual territory. So that's the minimum. Second, some may see it as a response to external pressures. My response to that, that's not the case. In fact, from the time we assumed office in Grenada, we were in fact looking at the industry and asking ourselves whether or not the appropriate pricing was right. As you would appreciate in the case of Grenada, we started off our CBI pricing product at 350,000 US. I think two adjustments, 350,000 US for the private developments and 200,000 US for the National Transformation Fund. There were two adjustments that were made, I think, for a single applicant under the National Transformation Fund. The prior administration had adjusted the fee down to 150 and had made one adjustment to 220 for the real estate development projects. So in Grenada's case, the adjustment that we are going to make in light of the new agreement on a minimum price cap would be, in fact, to move the National Transformation Fund single applicant minimum amount back to 200,000 US. There's really no need for us to adjust per se the developers portion, which was already at 220. But we want to ensure that we keep the differential between the development and the National Transformation Fund. So to that extent, we will be adjusting the developers amount as well. So I'm saying net here because we want to re-emphasize that it's a net amount that we want the governments to have. In the CBI business, there are commissions and so on that are paid, marketing fees and so on, as part of the administrative and marketing services that are provided. And being a citizen of any of these islands, in my view, is a privilege. It's not a right. And so I think having an appropriate minimum fee helps to send that message. And it's also important to ensure that the net amount comes to the government, because at the end of the day, it is investing in the country or the respective territories. And we want to make sure that we are the ones who are benefiting from getting, and I'm saying we here as in the countries that are benefiting from getting these investment flows.
Very well. Now, closer to home, Prime Minister, in respect of local developments around the Kawana Bay settlement. Now, we're aware that there was an out-of-court settlement that was reached with the previous investor. Now, what about the investors, the individual investors, the passport holders who invested in the previous project? What is the repayment plan for those individual investors, and what does that timeline look like?
All right, so I can't give you an immediate timeline at this point in time. As part of the process, the government acquired the property. And so anyone who has a real estate interest in the property are entitled as a matter of law. They are entitled as a matter of law under the Land Acquisition Act to, in fact, make a claim for compensation. We have, in fact, via the Ministry of Legal Affairs and the Attorney General's Chambers, set up a portal for these claims to be made. I am not in a position to give you a very specific details as to the number of claims that have been filed, but I expect that we have received several. The next stage would be for us to value their respective legal property interests in the property, and then either sit with their attorneys and agree on a compensation, or if we are unable to agree on the compensation quantum, then a tribunal will be set up to determine the compensation that has to be paid.
Okay, but you don't have a specific timeline around, and I suppose that is because of I suppose each individual claim. So it's not a matter of just
it's not necessarily
a blanket claim per se.
Blanket claim per se. I mean, if we can get and sometimes what happens is that if you settle one, it more or less would form the parameters by which you may settle all. Because, for instance, if what the person had was let's say a single bedroom condo, and some value is placed on whatever that value is at the time of the acquisition, it's unlikely that the quantum will change significantly for anyone else, because what you attempting to do is assess what's the value of the real estate interest they have. And in many instances, those real estate interests would be the same or similar. You probably have a 1 or 2 bedroom, as the case might be. But I think the Attorney General's Chambers would probably be best placed to give the very specifics as to how much, how many persons have filed claims or indicated an interest in seeking compensation, and where they are in discussions with the attorneys who may be representing them.
Well, I would certainly be following up with the Attorney General, Senator Claudette Joseph, who has never shied away from answering our questions. So she gets a feather in the cap for that, sir. Now, let us talk about upcoming CBI projects. Now, last year, the state collected $382.2 million in CBI revenues, and not $1 billion, as was reported by the Investment Migration Insider. That went viral for some reason. But in the last year, sir, you've attended several CBI forums. Now, your travels have been critiqued for pretty much you're having a cabinet in the sky. That's what the other side is saying. But let us talk about the results of your attendance in the CBI forums. And again, what future CBI projects are we going to see coming on stream as a result of the new investors who are coming into the system? Again, last year, of course, when you appeared on the program, we had a conversation about just the very narrow scope of what the investment is used for, without, of course, understanding that there is a National Transformation Fund that results from those investments. So can you talk about what those future investments would look like?
Right. Well, I want to start first by just talking about the ongoing projects, because Grenada actually is one of the few, if not perhaps the only island in the CBI space, which actually has private development projects that have been successfully completed and that are ongoing. And that is crucial. And that is partly responsible for driving the success of Grenada's CBI program. Right? And it's important because the investment here is in the real economy. So in the case of the Six Senses Hotel, which is recently opened, in the case of the Intercontinental Hotel, which is ongoing, in case of the Silver Sands Beach House, which has also opened, in the case of the Koana Bay project, which we've been able to get back on track, in the case of the Grenada National Resort project in St. Patrick, which is ongoing. These investments are in the tourism sector, in the real estate. People call it the real estate development market, but it's really in the tourism because they're all building hotels. And in the case of Grenada, we still absolutely do need hotel rooms, and particularly high-end hotel rooms that can attract overnight visitors who spend money on the island. And if we just start with the construction industry alone, it has provided several hundreds of jobs to persons in the construction industry. And then when you go from construction to the actually opening of the hotel, for example, Six Sense, Silver Sands Beach House, you're talking there about several hundred Grenadians who are employed in the tourism and hotel sector. And I want to point out as well the fact that the developers are actually taking on significant risk by many instances, going beyond the traditional tourism belt in the south of the island. So in the case of Six Senses and the Intercontinental, you're in St. David, which is a half an hour drive from the airport. Prior to that, there would be no major hotel beyond a 5 or 10, 15-minute drive from the airport. In the case of the Grenada National Resort, you're talking all the way to St. Patrick, which is an hour and 15 minutes drive on not what are still winding and narrow roads. So we have to appreciate that people are taking significant risks in terms of continue to invest in the hotel and tourism sector and spreading that investment to the rural economies, which is absolutely vital and crucial for us, because we can't continue to have, in a sense, the tourism plant located in a narrow 2 or 3 mile radius in immediate south of the island and not have that spread. So that is important. Second, from the National Transformation Fund, we have taken a deliberate decision to make sure that we market this as a state, because that fund belongs to the state and the people of Grenada, to ensure that we can increase the number of applications that come through that process. And we have seen significant increases. And to that extent, we would have signed with some of the major and more reputable marketing agencies like Henley and Partners and others to make sure that they market Grenada, the state, and the National Transformation Fund. And as a result, we've seen increases in the inflows there. And we have to appreciate a couple of things. If you look at the recent IMF report that talks about the fact that Grenada's debt to GDP is trending down. We have set in our fiscal rules. They need to anchor our debt to GDP to around 60%. In other words, our aim is to ensure that we get to a point where our debt does not exceed 60% of our GDP. Right? Currently, we're around 74, 73, and the aim is to trend downwards. Now, this is significant because when your debt is high, it basically means that a lot of the revenue you get is going to go towards paying back debt, and you'll not be able to oftentimes meet even maybe your recurrent expenditure, or more crucially, have capital investments that the country would desperately need in terms of infrastructure, in terms of education, healthcare, and in terms of supporting the economy in particular. So that is crucial. You'd also appreciate that we have made significant strides to address a lot of the labor issues that we inherited, from paying the pensions to increasing the minimum wage, to paying the dock salaries of the teachers, to the regularization process, which is ongoing. And those things are crucial because that is actually money that all people are receiving. And if you take someone, for example, who's worked for $800 for the last 10, 15 years, and their salaries have gone to $1,200, you're talking here about a one-third jump in their salaries. And we have to appreciate the knock-on effect. If what you make is $800 a month in Grenada, you are barely able to survive. And in those circumstances, people have to appreciate then that your spending power is significantly curtailed. The quality of your life is significantly curtailed. Your ability to educate your children is significantly curtailed. And so we have to make sure that the government's finances are strong enough on a sustained basis that we can ensure that we meet our commitments to our employees, to our workers, to our suppliers, because that in turn has a knock-on effect on the overall growth of the economy. I also want to make one final point about the CBI program, which is we also have to play defense, right? Because as you're aware, the programs have received international attention from our partners, the Americans, the Europeans, the United Kingdom. And part of the traveling has been, in fact, to meet with our partners and to engage in deep and meaningful conversations, and to invite them to Grenada and the rest of the OECS islands that have the program, to explain to them what the programs are about, to show them the level of due diligence that we do, so that they meet our staff, they meet the bankers, they meet our local agents who are involved in the project, they meet the government staff, they see the projects, the actual projects that are funded by CBI, so that they have a full appreciation of what these programs are. Because too often you may find in the capitals of Europe, North America, or the UK, the technocrat or the bureaucrat who's dealing with this is simply reading media reports, or sometimes non-media reports, but reports by other actors or other persons who do not favor the programs or who want to use them for their own intent, or who sometimes are just malicious. And if we don't engage and make sure that we provide accurate information to our partners, then we are leaving it up to others to shape their narrative about what the programs are. And I think one of the dividends that has come from our travels and our engagement with our partners, that they now have a much better appreciation of what the programs are, the benefits of the programs, and the level of due diligence and the seriousness and the professional manner in which the programs are run. So they would have had the opportunity in Grenada's case to interact with Grenada Cooperative Bank, which is the only bank that does CBI, to interview the staff with no interference, no objections from us. They would have met our CBI staff, or management, or board, or local and marketing agents, or FIU, or CARICOM impacts, or partners we rely on in the region to help us with the security checks and clearances. And that has gone on across the board for the last 2 years since we've been in office. And we feel relatively assured that our partners now have a much better appreciation of the significance and importance of the programs, and are therefore prepared to work with us to ensure that the long-term sustainability and viability of the programs.
Mm-hmm. Well, let us talk about the IMF report to which you alluded to, which is the next question here. Now, the just concluded staff report said this about CBI revenues, Prime Minister, quote, "A surge in CBI revenue has resulted in a large budget surplus of 9%, an increase in government deposits, and lower public debt. The key fiscal priorities are to improve the management of these potentially volatile CBI revenues. Contain the growth of recurrent expenditures and strengthen public financial management," unquote. Prime Minister, the IMF seems to be saying here that CBI as a means of revenue collection is volatile, and that, of course, perhaps we might have to look at more a long-term sustainable growth measures to sustain Grenada's very impressive growth rate.
Yeah, well, my response to the IMF on this, including in my engagement with them, was that if you actually looked at the trend of Grenada's CBI program, you would see that the program has always been measured and relatively predictable in its growth. The spike in revenues really came about last year because of the fact that we had a large backlog, and because when this administration took office, unknown to us, and I want to repeat this, because when the Russian-Ukrainian war broke out, all of the territories in the region voluntarily indicated that they would cease processing Russian applicants. Yes, that was the public statement made by all of the CBI territories in the OECS. In Grenada's case, unknown to us and unknown to the public, the NNP administration quietly and surreptitiously began processing Russian applications. And that is the situation I walked into office. And so within a short space of time of becoming the Prime Minister, it was brought to my attention that this was happening. And so we had to be able to treat with this. And what I said to my partners, and I'm saying partners here as in our external partners at the time, is that we were not aware of this. And in the circumstances, we would clearly have to look into the matter and come to some arrangement. And so what I think you would have been aware that by February of the following year, we agreed with the United States of America and our colleague OECS territories who were doing the CBI program to stop the processing of Russian applications. The effect of that is that obviously within that 6-month period leading up to stopping so, there was a deluge of applications that came and were backlogged. And one of the things we wanted to ensure is that we, despite the fact that we stopped, we were not prepared to rush the application process, because we wanted to ensure we were not going to compromise our due diligence. We were not going to compromise the integrity of the program. And so, yes, we ended up with a backlog. As a result of that backlog, which we've sought to clear over the last several months, there has been a spike in the revenue. And obviously, if you're following cricket, you could have consistent overs of 4 and 5 runs, and then someone has a big 40 runs over, and then you start saying the batting is volatile or unpredictable. But that's really, in a sense, what led to the spike. And even in terms of our numbers for 2024, we are seeing, in a sense, a more consistent trend that we would have always seen prior to this situation. And so we have never, when we look at our budgeting process, we, to a large extent, do not base our budget on CBI revenues. We continue to base our budget largely on our traditional sources of revenues. And therefore, from a fiscal management perspective, and I think that's part of what the IMF is hinting at, to make sure that our budgeting process is in a sense not derailed by the fact that you may have a large CBI revenues this year and then a precipitous drop the following year. And we are very conscious of that, and hence we do not intend to make our budgeting process in a sense heavily dependent on CBI.
Very well, but the previous administration did temporarily suspend those sales when they were in office. So can you?
No, I'm saying that's what they said. That's what they told the nation.
But that's what they told the nation. So what you're saying is what they told the nation was not consistent with what you meant.
That's correct. Not just what I meant with what they did. They told the nation one thing, and without informing the nation that they were going to resume the processing of Russians, they in fact went ahead and did so.
I see. Okay. Okay. Very well. Interesting. Well, that is a development I was not aware of. So thank you for that update, sir. Now, speaking of revenue collection again and fiscal management, the same Article 4, the report from the IMF panned better management of the National Transformation Fund to ensure that that CBI revenues were transparently recorded. Can you articulate what they observed there that made them arrive at that conclusion that perhaps the revenues were not being transparently recorded?
No, I think, and in fact, I objected to that statement, and I still object to it. But however, it's the IMF's statement, and they're entitled to say whatever they want. Now, we've made the point that I think this here has to do with the question of how you, from the budgeting process, how you account for the numbers. Right. So, for instance, when we formed the government, CBI revenues were being recorded in some instances as grants. And my position is, well, it's not a grant. No external partner is giving us a gift. This is essentially Government of Grenada revenues, specifically attributed to the CBI program. And so, how you record this in your budgetary process is really what I think they're getting at. So, for instance, the prior administration used to be recording some of it as grants. We do not record it as grants. I certainly don't think it's a grant. It's not a gift from anybody. It's an investment that is being made into the country, either in the form of the fees we earn from the real estate projects or in the direct investment made by someone who wishes to become a citizen of the country. Now, at any given time, when you are recording these funds, for instance, on an annual basis, there might be questions as to whether or not you show the balances of funds from previous years, as opposed to whether you're showing just the current balance. So I think those are some of the issues that they're speaking with as to how the funds are treated. But unfortunately, words like transparency, in a literal sense, transparent means to see through. And when you use some of these words in the context of economic management or so on, it sometimes gives the impression that somebody's hiding something or so. And that's why I objected to the use of the word, because of the connotation that it normally has in the context of politics and so on. So our view is we may have a difference of opinion from them as to how we record and treat with those funds. For instance, whether the financial statements, the budgetary statements, and should reflect not just the current state of the financing that comes from CBI, but whether it includes, for example, all of the previous years and what are the balances that you're holding over from those accounts to ensure that it's added into the current situation. So these are really what I would call technical, financial, different perspectives or views as to how those things are to be treated with. But at the end of the day, it's a matter for Grenada, not the IMF. It is really for us to decide how we wish to categorize and treat the funds. And I'll give you an example. So there are fees that are paid to the government of Grenada when someone makes an investment to a real estate development. So, for example, there's a $50,000 fee that is paid to the state. That fee, I think in our books, are treated differently from, say, the National Transformation Fund, where a direct investment is made. And I'm saying treated differently as in it's recorded differently. And it's some of those, I think, differential treatments that I think they are driving at from a technical point of view. And so we will accept that we perhaps do have to review the various treatments and see whether or not we take a consistent approach and treat all fees the same, regardless of whether it's an actual investment fee or an administrative fee or a fee paid to the government arising from the private developers and so on. But those are internal things that I think the finance people and the technical people at the Ministry of Finance will continue to engage with them on.
Absolutely, and of course, the report again, as a wonk, I enjoyed reading the report and a lot of the nuances that we're not going to get into all of it. But I thought it was a very interesting and enlightening report, and certainly the Minister of Finance, who has been, I don't know if he's dodging us or what, but we would extend an invitation.
No, I don't think the Minister of Finance is dodging you. He would have had to travel this week, but I'm happy to have him on once the schedule comes.
Absolutely, Prime Minister. Thank you for that. Now, moving on, Prime Minister, we're going to go on to crime and national security. Would you agree that it has been a tough year for Grenada in respect of what has been happening on that score?
No, absolutely. I mean, the fact that our young men have shot and killed each other in what appear to be reprisals over sometimes ego, there's probably no other way to put it, is sad. And it's dangerous, and it tells all of us how we cannot take our peace and safety and national security for granted. And it tells us the challenge that we would have both from a demand and a supply perspective, because I will start from a demand supply. Why, Kellon, you and I are not criminals? It's because of the way we were brought up. It's because of the values that were instilled in us. It's because of the opportunities that we got, that we were able to take to make something of our lives. And so we need to make sure that in Grenada, that we continue a value system that encourages the right type of behavior, that gives our young men the opportunity to value their own lives and the lives of others, and to be able to make something of themselves. If we don't do that, then the demand for a young man to feel that a gun is something he should pursue or want to have will remain there. And you'd find more persons seeking to do so. So it's absolutely important from that perspective for us to pay attention to our young men, for us to speak with them, to engage with them, to give them the opportunities to make sure that they have the right value systems in place. And on the supply side, it is vital for us to make sure that we continue to work with strengthening the national security apparatus to detect and prevent firearms from entering the country. It's very important for us regionally and internationally for us to work with the United States of America in particular, which is where most of the guns come from, Central and South America as well, to ensure that the supply of firearms, particularly small firearms, handguns and so on, into our islands is curbed or intercepted. So we have to work on both sides of the coin to reduce the risk of firearms being present or prevalent in our countries, because I think we can all appreciate that firearms are lethal. And it's one thing if you and someone argue and then you have a fist fight. You are likely to survive. It's another thing if you and someone argue and both of them are pulling firearms, then they will die. And in a sense, that's what we've had on the island. And that's been the main challenge, as I've said publicly. Otherwise, crime itself has in many aspects been, I may use the word stable or even trending down, but it's absolutely vital for us to ensure that from the firearms perspective, that we do everything that we can to curb the situation and make sure that we do not suffer from the scourge that many of the islands in the OECS and the wider Caribbean are already suffering from.
Now, Prime Minister, your approach to treating issues of crime, and I listened to you intently in the budget debate. You are articulating that as Minister of National Security, you are going to have sort of a hands-off approach and allow the men and women of the Royal Grenada Police Force to do that work without any type of interference, which is in stark contrast to what you articulated as the previous Minister of National Security's position on that. However, now your approach to, at least your public posture to treating issues of crime when they occur, has come under scrutiny. Your predecessor, Minister of National Security, has chided you for not being a leader in times of crisis, who projects or even inspires public confidence against the backdrop of rising crime in the country. So, for example, again, the analogy that is used is that, whenever you have a major crime happening, that you do hear from the leaders who would come out, conduct a press conference, and allay the fears that may exist in the society. What is your thought process around at least how you think about your public posturing on crime and giving the public or inspiring confidence in the public from the leader of national security when major or high-profile crimes occur, and I'm not only speaking of what happened in the Kathy Brandale, because I also believe that all crimes should be treated with the same gravity, irrespective of the socioeconomic status of who is committing that. So, what is your thought process around that idea?
Well, I think let me answer by first saying, if I'm required to make public statements purely from the perspective of reassuring the public of the importance of ensuring that we do our best to curb crime, to suppress crime, and to prevent crime, and to support the men and women who treat on a day-to-day basis with the criminal elements, that's absolutely fine. And there are no issues with that. But we also have to appreciate that as the Minister of National Security, I'm not involved in the day-to-day technical aspects of crime fighting. And so when you have criminal or crime occurring, oftentimes these are ongoing investigations. Oftentimes the situation is fluid, and the police oftentimes itself doesn't have a complete picture or knowledge of what is taking place. And the police needs to be given the opportunity to be able to do their work before we run and issue public statements. Because the risk here is that you will say things that are inaccurate, that are factual, and oftentimes can gaslit the situation because you're coming from a place of ill-informed and ill-advised views. Hence, oftentimes you would appreciate that my approach has been to await full briefing from the police so that I can also ask the appropriate and relevant questions, so that when I go to the public, I have as much of the facts as possible, so that we can then speak with the facts and then treat with how we are dealing with the situation. It is vitally important for us not to politicize crime, criminal behavior, the suppression of crime, as well as the steps we need to ensure that we dissuade our young men in particular from becoming criminals.
Mm-hmm.
If you look at the Caribbean, if you look at a place like Trinidad, for example, you would see that repeatedly, whoever is in opposition blames whoever's in government for the crime wave. And then the government changes, and the same thing happens. And the crime
it's become politicized.
Crime wave continues unabated,
mm-hmm.
accelerated in many instances. And in fact, part of our challenge in Grenada is that we are suffering from the crime wave in Trinidad, because some of the shootings that have happened here have been done by Trinidadians, right? So we need to appreciate that we cannot politicize crime, right? I'm not a crime solver. I don't carry out the investigations, right? That's not the job of the Ministry of National Security. The job of the Ministry of National Security is to provide the policy and the resource support to the technical team that fights and suppresses crime, from the police to the prosecution department, to the office of the DPP, etc. And so those of us who want to engage in self-promotion and try to figure that this is a race to who can grab the mic first, instead of understanding the complexities of crimes, the impact it has on our reputation, both individually and as a country. The most I can say to you is the population will judge whether or not you really have the best interests of Grenadians, the young men who are the perpetrators or victims of crime, the wider society, and then the general reputation of Grenada. So I'll give you an example. Now, we are a tourist-dependent country, right? For the most part, Grenada is a very safe place. Why would I want to highlight criminal activity in Grenada as opposed to downplay it in the context of where we are tourist-dependent? It will be foolhardy. It will be contrary to the wider interests of Grenada and contrary to our overall positive image. So yes, if something horrific happens from a criminal perspective, we want to be able to understand why it happened. We want to be able to arrest the perpetrators as quickly as possible, and we want to be able to be empathetic and to show our solidarity with the victims of that situation. But you do not want to highlight that all of a sudden Grenada is not a safe place and somehow we've gone horribly wrong. When from time to time, in our entire history, we've had horrific acts of criminality being conducted every now and then. That's human nature. It happens everywhere. But overall, we still continue to be one of the safest islands in the world. And we need to do everything to make sure that we can maintain and support that and promote that, rather than highlighting the one or two instances where we've had unfortunate criminal acts. So again, there are those who wish to engage in self-promotion and who would use any opportunity to try and do so at the expense of the overall reputation and well-being of Grenada, at the overall reputation of and hard work of the Royal Grenada Police Force and the wider society. I will not engage in that. And so I will continue to ensure that we support the RGPF, that we call upon citizens to work and cooperate with the RGPF whenever there are reports of crime, to also report suspicious activities or incidents or suspicious persons, and that we continue to secure our own communities. and our own villages, and that we continue to engage with our young people so that they don't feel alienated and then feel that the only way out for them is to turn to a life of crime. And so I will not be seeking to take an approach of the minute time something untoward happens, that you run to the media to try and say, okay, we are in control, and as if I could actually prevent the next criminal activity or the next crime from happening. The RGPF can't do that. I can't do that. And anyone who's trying to pretend that they can do so is missing the point. But as a country, yes, we have to rally around each other. We have to support each other, and we have to allay the fears of our citizens that somehow Grenada is out of control, and that crime is rampant. That is not the case. That is not the picture, and I will not paint such a picture.
Absolutely. I don't know if you have a mic close to you. You can drop it there. I said that in jest. Let us go on, Prime Minister, to talk about the gun amnesty, the ongoing gun amnesty. I have to say that the Royal Grenada Police Force, they have been very consistent with respect to updating the public on how that is progressing. They have been very consistent in updating the public in respect of crimes that are being solved. Now, your administration panned a robust zero-tolerance policy against illegal firearm possession and gun crimes following the end of the gun amnesty and the implementation of the firearms, at least amendments to the Firearms Act as we currently know it. Now, your colleagues in the bar, you are an attorney, of course, those in the criminal bar, one of your colleagues, Mr. Ruggles Ferguson, incidentally, and by the way, the bar must be complimented for coming forward to engage in their own crime reduction initiative, because it's not only about the government, right? But the Bar Association, they're making the point that perhaps some of the proposals in the legislation is a bit too draconian. As an attorney, do some of those proposals in the amendments to the legislation give you any pause, especially in respect to the mandatory minimums?
No, they don't. And I want to make the point of saying that as a criminal, anyone who's practicing criminal defense law, that's natural. It's something they do every day. And so from that perspective, they will have what I call an ingrained bias to always look at whether or not their clientele, their client base is likely to be, whether the penalties are likely to be unduly harsh for their clientele, for the clients. And therefore I understand the perspective from which they will come. But I think we also have to understand the perspective of the wider society and the perspective of the persons who are victims of firearms and the potential terrible consequences for the widespread possession and use of illegal firearms in Grenada. And I think if we needed evidence of that, the last several months has made that absolutely clear. Now, I've been advocating for zero tolerance to firearms long before we had the spike in shooting, and long before we got to the point of the amnesty, because I recognized early o'clock the challenges that all of our colleagues in the wider region are facing, from St. Kitts to St. Lucia. I want to put things in perspective. In one day, last year, St. Lucia had 17 homicides, gun-related homicides, 17. Grenada and the wider OECS had to provide police support through the RSS to St. Lucia to help curb the situation. So this is not some movie. This is not some fairy tale. And all of us run the risk of being victims of firearms if we continue to take a tolerant approach to the presence of firearms in our society, from random drive-by shootings to shootouts in the middle of nowhere. You see those things in Trinidad. You see those things in Jamaica. Innocent boys, girls, 6, 7, 8 years old, their lives have been snuffed out by stray bullets. Right. So as lawyers, as people working in the justice system, we are not immune from that reality. And so law is not immutable. Principles of law are not immutable. We have to make sure that we can shape and fashion law to address the wider concerns of the community and the society, and to make sure that we have a society that is sustainable and one where public peace and safety is paramount. And I think we know that. No matter how great your economy, Trinidad is far wealthier than Grenada. But as a Grenadian, how many of us will feel confident that we can go and live in Trinidad in light of the security concerns and the challenges they have? We want to live in a place where the police has to become militarized to deal with ordinary civilian criminal activity. I think the answer is no. So I'm saying the time has come when we need to ensure that we don't allow a lot of these new liberal, oftentimes Western notions of justice, which is oftentimes putting the rights of the criminals above the right of the innocent citizens. And I want to make this point. If you do a desktop research on some of the young men who've killed each other, you would see some of these young men who are on bail for multiple crimes, including attempted murder by firearms. And so we have to ask ourselves, the problem is right in front of you. It's clear. And it's not just a Grenada situation. From the Bahamas in the north come down to Trinidad in the south. You have persons who are on bail for multiple offenses, oftentimes gun-related, shooting at the police, attempting to kill each other multiple times. They're on bail, and it always ends the way it ended here in Grenada, with them killing each other and oftentimes killing innocent people in the process. So are we going to say in those circumstances, okay, let us continue giving them bail? Let us continue having them go to prison for a month or 3 months, and then they come back out and continue to shoot and kill people? What is the message we are sending? That it's okay to be that way, and therefore more of the young men will feel, well, there are no consequences to my actions, and therefore it's fine for me to then walk around with a firearm and continue. So even when we have the amnesty, right, the police is still intercepting people with firearms. They're not bringing it in some instances, right? So it tells you the amount of work we need to do to make sure that firearms do not remain an attractive proposition. And this is just one tool associated with that. So I have no difficulty with the Bar Association airing its views. The draft legislation was sent to them. They provided us with their comments. We will obviously factor those comments in ultimately. But at the end of the day, I think as the policymakers, we have the opportunity to use a tool and to send the signal that we are taking a zero tolerance to firearms. And all of the statistics, all of the data shows that when you have a high prevalence of firearms in a locale, in a community, in a country, you run the risk of people dying or being maimed from firearms. And oftentimes the wounds are even self-inflicted, or they accidentally shoot their friends or their family. Surgeons will tell you that oftentimes when they treat people for gunshot wounds, a lot of the times the highest percentage of persons are persons who accidentally shot themselves or shot their family members as well. So I think you can tell I'm quite passionate about this issue.
You
seen what firearms have done right here in the region, in the wider region in Central America, South America, and in North America where you live. I don't know what more empirical evidence we need from that than to say that you need to have a zero tolerance to firearms.
Well, you mentioned the neoliberal approach, that Western order, which of course you and I am sure we have the same philosophical approach on this. But former Senator Chester Humphrey agrees with you totally on that score. But Prime Minister, I mean, one would say that there are zero tolerance policies in other countries. There is the death penalty, for example, in a place like Texas, which is not Grenada. Of course, it's not the Caribbean, two different contexts. But the point that some might make is that, yes, in spite of all of these zero tolerance prescriptions that you are going to put in place, that crime may still persist.
Absolutely. This is not a suggestion. First of all, once you deal with human beings, you'll always have crime, right? Once you deal with human beings, you'll always have bad behavior. However, the question is, how do we mitigate that? How do we minimize that? And so the idea that, because the question is, okay, what's the alternative? So you would have someone who just shot someone back out on the street, pending his trial, with the opportunity again to shoot someone else. Part of the question of justice is also justice for the victims and justice for the wider society. So if you have a propensity to commit crime, simply because rehabilitation isn't working, simply because your social upbringing has brought you to a point where no matter what sort of social interventions one may try or rehabilitation one may try, you will continue to commit crime. In those circumstances, our obligation is to protect the public from you, and you have to be locked up. And if necessary, locked up for as long as it's necessary to make sure that the society is protected. So it is not just a question of, yes, in that sense, we are preventing you, the individual perpetrator, from having the opportunity to commit crime again, and to also send a message to those who may be in doubt that if they do so, that there will be consequences to the action. So it is not a suggestion that the only function of jail sentences and so on is to be rehabilitatory. We certainly want that to happen. But at the same time, if it's not working, we also need to make sure that we can protect the public from persons who are engaging in serious crime. And I just want to make the broader point for context. For one, my own philosophical outlook is that you should minimize sending someone to prison unless it is clear that it is necessary. And so as part of the overall reform of our justice system, we also have to be able to have a discussions about what types of behaviors that we deem criminal in the first place, and what types of behavior that should warrant imprisonment as opposed to not warranting imprisonment. Because in many instances, we send people to prison for very silly, innocuous stuff, obscene language, which essentially amongst the crude language, traffic offenses, and some of those things. In my mind, those issues should not warrant any jail or prison time at all, right? And then at the other instances, you have people who are raping people and are out on bail, right? So we also have to have a conversation about what type of criminal activity deserves firm and long sentences and which one don't. But as a public, we have to have that sort of debate and that sort of discussion, because again, we've inherited our criminal code from pre-independence. And so a lot of what was deemed as criminal or illegal or unlawful, even religious practices, have been criminalized. So we have to bear those things in mind. And that's part of the discussion that I think as part of this overall conversation about justice reform, prison reform, we will have to engage in as a society.
Mm-hmm. And of course, the final issue on crime, and of course, your rhetoric, I wouldn't go as far as to say it's bellicose, but certainly your anti-crime rhetoric, I would say, comes very close to teetering to bellicose. But let us talk about the timeline for the construction of the new prison, as you articulated, as well as the timeline for improving the capacity of the Royal Grenada Police Force to respond to the 21st century context of crime. You mentioned firearms. You also mentioned rehabilitating a lot of the police stations, the colonial era police stations that we still have in the state that have not been renovated for many years. So talk about those timelines, sir.
Right. Well, the prison timeline is still, in a sense, very embryonic. The reality is we recognize that this is a major challenge. But obviously, you have to find a site. You have to then have an agreement on the concept of whether or not you are simply seeking to do a maximum type security arrangement, as in a new one, and you keep the existing site for perhaps what I will call more low-level type crime. So we are not yet at the stage where we have fully developed these concepts. What I can say to you is that it was simply an announcement to indicate to the public that this is something that must happen, given the age of the building, given the significant challenges we have with physical structure, and also even from a perspective of the prisoners. Despite what you may call my bellicose approach to crime, they're human beings as well, and obviously we have to ensure that their basic human rights and so on are intact. And oftentimes, if the physical conditions are not appropriate, you can find yourself running afoul of that. So we also have to appreciate that despite the fact that they committed crimes, that there's certain minimum physical standards that we are expected to meet as a civilized country in terms of how we treat our prisoners. And the fact is, just because of the physical challenges of the environment, it is very difficult to do so in many instances, especially if you're trying to encourage rehabilitation and shield younger offenders from more seasoned criminals. So that, I would say, is more in the medium to long term. But we are, in fact, sending a technical team to visit other prisons within the region, especially the more modern ones, so they can come back and provide some additional input in the concept and the discussions as to what is required. In the case of the RGPF, the timeline has already commenced. As I would have indicated, we are already renovating the floor line building on the Coronat, which we've purchased to house the RGPF administrative headquarters. The renovation is ongoing right now. We are hoping that the bulk of it could be completed by the end of June, because we really want to have the RGPF relocated entirely by September, October of this year. We are working now on finding an appropriate relocation for the Grenville police station. So that is ongoing. So I anticipate that certainly within the next 6 months that a relocation will commence. The St. Paul's police station, the work has completed on this, and so the police, if they have not moved back as yet, should be moving back anytime soon. In the case of stations like the police station in St. David, we expect work. A fire station was built and simply sat there not commissioned for other simple things like sorting out the electrical connections and so on. We are working on those things with a view to doing renovation work on St. David as well. Places like St. Mark as well, we have to do work and so on. So the physical infrastructure, the installation of cameras and all of those things at our police stations, and to monitor the entrances, exits, the cells and so on, all of that we are planning to roll out on an ongoing basis. So that's the timeline. We are also looking at some tactical issues as to where we actually locate new police stations, even if they are smaller, more nimble, flexible outposts, just to ensure that we have greater coverage. So, for instance, in the south of the island, which has significant traffic, both in terms of business, vehicular traffic, as well as that's taking more and more of the population, we are looking at sites like the old sugar mill to determine whether or not it would be appropriate to have a police outpost there, because that way you can cover all of the sort of major arteries from Montu, Grandans Valley, the Grandans Main Road, the Morris Bishop Highway, Dusty Highway, Lansapine. So we're looking at some of those to address as well, because we need to ensure that we think about the next 5-10 years in terms of how Grenada is going to grow and develop. Training, and that's also very important. We're working with some of our international partners to get better training for the RGPF, but also in-house. We recognize that it's important to, in fact, we have the challenge where, as I've talked about, the current leadership of the RGPF are all retirees who we've asked to stay back on because there's been no succession planning within the middle and upper level of the RGPF. And that's a situation we've inherited. And these things can come about by sometimes basic failure to think through what one is doing. If you recruit all of the police officers at the same age at the same time, they're going to retire at the same age at the same time. So simple things like staggering the recruitment age to make sure that people are not all retiring at the same time are things we need to change within the RGPF. Also ensuring that we can recruit people with specific skill sets because you're dealing with technology. You have to be able to unlock cell phones. You have to be able to fly drones. You know, all of those things. So we can't, the profile of who's a police officer also has to be changed because you can't just be thinking about physical strength or stature or stamina. We also have to think about the very specific skill sets that are also required in a modern society to be able to treat with crime. So, for example, you probably find that a lot of crime is either committed, planned, or communicated over cell phones, right? And they need to be able to ensure that when we are conducting investigations and we come into cell phones that are locked and so on, that the police has the capacity to unlock it and to be able to retrieve evidence and so on, are some of the things that we are looking to work on by ensuring we can buy the appropriate equipment. We can look at the law and ensure that if the law doesn't currently address it, that the police has the ability through the law to be able to access that kind of data and information to be able to use it. Relying on more technology, I talk about drones and how we can use that to help patrol or host to intercept same firearms and narcotics and other things, or human trafficking and so on. So all of that is part of where the changes are, and those things are things we are looking at immediately to begin to have them roll out.
Absolutely. Viewers and listeners, we are sitting with Grenada's Prime Minister, the Honorable Dickon Mitchell, on the second anniversary of the administration's service to the nation by way of the last election. We're going to take a quick break and come back with the rest of the program. Please stand by.
Should your loved ones pass on, they deserve to be treated with dignity. And at S.A. Johnson Funeral Home, we can provide you with that service. We can take you every step of the way during your sorrowful moments. When that need arises, call S.A. Johnson Funeral Home at 347-777-9797. That's 347-777-9797. S.A. Johnson Funeral Home is a Caribbean family-owned funeral home here in Brooklyn, providing funeral services, but in a dignified way. From cremation to burial to the repatriation of your loved ones, you don't have to go through the hassle, as we provide exceptional service that allows you to mourn and heal peacefully. For more information, visit our website, www.sajohnsonfuneral.org. Send us an email at sajfuneral@aol.com or call 347-777-9797. S.A. Johnson Funeral Home, because you deserve to be treated with dignity.
And viewers and listeners, welcome back to this week's edition of the Bubb Report. Of course, we have the Honorable Prime Minister here with us. We know that the Prime Minister has a busy schedule. We did have a laundry list of questions, sir, but I do understand that you have another engagement at 12. So we are going to get to two very critical questions, and then we will close the program. But one has to do with education and youth development in the context of the recent announcement of raising the compulsory age of education to 17. Now, concern has been raised in respect to children who are academically and technically challenged. The concern is that our special needs population are aging out of the school system, at least the schools that can accommodate them. Now, can there be an agreement or an arrangement with some of the centers of technical excellence that you articulated to ensure that those students can also receive the same technical skills? Because in many respects, they're just differently abled. They have different learning styles.
So absolutely. I mean, the whole point here is to make sure that everyone has access to education for as long as we can compulsorily do so. Now, obviously at 18, you're an adult. And so we can't insist beyond that age that you remain in school and have access to education. And so the key thing here is that we want to ensure that until you become an adult, you have access to education. And that includes every and any type of education that's available. And that also includes our citizens who are differently abled. You know, last Thursday, sorry, I was in St. Paul's to attend the School for the Deaf. It's been Deaf Awareness Month. And, you know, again, it was a very enlightening opportunity to understand their perspective, to understand the challenges. But one of the things that I was really impressed with was the fact that the teachers make the point of saying that the students who are hearing impaired go to the normal schools, and the teachers go to the schools and work with them in the school setting, in the normal school setting, because what it does is that you don't single them out as somehow being disadvantaged and lob them together in a single group where they do not have the benefit of the wide experience of the education system. And I found this truly inspiring and commendable. And that is sort of what I think we need to be able to do, to ensure that as much as possible, persons who are especially abled have access to the general education system, but then we obviously put in the additional resources that are required to help them because of the fact that they are especially abled. So one of the things you probably would find is oftentimes because they're especially abled, there may be things that will be exceptional, whether it's music, whether it's creative arts, and we need to make sure that we give them the opportunity to have access to those things as well. So as part of our reform of education, we need to make sure that things like music is accessible to everyone in schools, because we just don't know how many talented people have fallen by the wayside simply because we never gave them access to a musical instrument or never encouraged them to take part in a musical instrument. We don't know how many creative people that we've just never discovered because within the school system, the creative arts is just not as readily available as the traditional academic approach to those things. How many people have not become farmers because we haven't played enough emphasis on the fact that farming and agriculture is absolutely important. You see, one of the things we need to be careful about is, I keep saying we have to ask, what is the kind of society we're trying to produce and what are our natural advantages? So if our natural advantages is things like agriculture and fishing, if we recognize that we need technical skills, why are we persisting then in undervaluing and underexposing those areas to our citizens and having them continue to spend 18 years in school doing things that when they come out from school, it doesn't allow them to actually function or thrive or even put themselves in the job market where they can earn. And let's take the construction sector, for example. The bulk of our young men and women who enter the construction sector, you know what title they're entering as? Helpers. They're entering as helpers because we have not sought to put the education system in a place that would allow them to have some actual certification in a particular technical skill, whether it's masonry, painting, tiling, plumbing, electrician, whatever you want to call it. And the net result is that they're entering the market to do, in a sense, the jobs that nobody really wants to do, the helping job. You get the least pay, you probably work the longest hours, and you get the most difficult aspect of the work to do. And so we are almost setting them up to enter into the youth poverty narrative that happens because you've exited school. You are not suitably qualified, even for things like construction, because you don't understand the theory behind it, you don't understand the technique behind it, and essentially you are forced to hopefully learn on the job. And oftentimes the learning on the job doesn't really take place that allows you to move from a helper to a more skilled worker, because in many instances, the contractor is simply concerned with getting his job done and not with giving you job training or training you, because he may feel that's not his obligation or his duty. So I'm using this as an example to say, going back to the question of persons who may be challenged or especially or differently abled, that we need to make sure that the education system is also taking care of them in the widest possible sense as well, and that we use the fact that we don't have a compulsory education age of up to 18 to be able to give them access to those things as well, and to encourage students who dropped out from school to go back to school, because you have the free tuition, you have the meals, we have things like uniform assistance and so on that is provided to persons who are challenged financially and so on. So there's now more than ever ample opportunities for our youth to be educated so that they can actually have a more meaningful lives when they exit school. I will just add here, we also recognize that transportation and the cost of transportation is a challenge. The Transport Commission is working on initially looking at a pilot. We hope that we can start this in September when we begin to provide transportation to schools, select schools as a pilot, so that we could then have that pilot, learn our lessons from it, and then see whether we can have a wider national transportation system that can ease the burden on our parents for ensuring that our students are able to get to school. So I think you would appreciate that we recognize that there's a lot to do in education. We've been doing a lot, and I'm happy that you've raised the question of our especially able to ensure that we also don't leave them behind.
Absolutely, and I'm sure that particular educator who reached out to me would be very happy with that response. Now, Prime Minister, let us talk about two final issues here. The pension reform process. Now, you announced in the recent town hall government's intention to move forward with a transferable pension scheme for contract workers in the public service. Now, why can't these workers be absorbed into the current pension scheme that will be under review as part of the regularization process with whatever new pension scheme that would be in place for the more established public workers?
It's just not financially sustainable. You are talking about the existing pension system that we have in Grenada is a non-funded pension system. So let me break that down. The pension legislation on our books date back to the 1950s, pre-independence, where the number of public servants was small, probably less than a couple hundred. And at that time, the state perhaps was in a position to, assuming the public servants and the numbers of public servants that remained a couple hundred. If it was a couple hundred today, we would not have any challenges. The reality is the pension that a public servant gets now is funded directly out of taxpayers' revenue every year. So it's called a non-funded pension. In other words, the pension isn't actually guaranteed because there is no actual funds that is set aside and being invested to pay that pension. And that is why you find many times in countries when you have a pension system like this, right? It's not a system. It is simply a case where the government has to find the money out of its annual budget every year to pay our pensioners. The problem with such a system is that if the government runs into fiscal challenges, the first set of people who tends to get chopped are in fact pensioners, because the government can't afford to not pay the workers, because then the country will grind to a halt. So you have a non-funded pension for an already large public service in the thousands. We do not have the government doesn't have the resources on its own to absorb another 3,000 or 4,000 people. That's what we're looking at here. 3,500 persons who work in one way or the other government and are called contracted workers who do not have any pension. And so we simply cannot absorb that 3,500 to the existing list, because then you're going to perhaps 8,000 people in an unfunded pension arrangement, right? It's not sustainable and the country will not be able to pay, right? And therefore, what we are seeking to do is to have a modern pension system where the employee contributes, the government contributes, and that fund is segregated from the government's annual revenues, and it is managed by a board of trustees comprised of government representative, the employees representative, and it is managed by a board of trustees in conjunction with the pension laws of Grenada, and is regulated by GAFIN, right, as all modern pension systems are. So for instance, the existing pension that we talk about now for existing public servants, GAFIN doesn't regulate that because there is no fund. There's no actual fund available. And in a sense, that is what it's important for public servants to understand and appreciate, that former administrations over the last 40 years, because there was no fund, simply just didn't pay it. Right? And there was no fund that the public servants could actually look to or insist that it be paid out of, because it is coming out of the annual budget every year. And so it's not sustainable, and it actually makes the public servants very vulnerable. The other key thing that I want to point out in the existing pensions scheme, or what I call non-pension scheme, Dr. Bubb, is the rules currently have certain minimum periods of time that people need to work for before they can qualify for the pension. So, for example, if it's 23 years, if at 20, you work for 20 years, and there's an opportunity for you to leave the public service either because you're getting a better job or a different career move or what have you.
You get that payout.
But no, in the current system, you can't move, because if you leave at 20, you will get nothing, absolutely nothing. Mm-hmm. So in many instances, you have public servants who want to make a career move, or a career choice, but they can't, because they're forced to grind until they get to this age, whether it's 21, 19, 23, whatever the minimum time is, before they can then get the pension. So in the system that we are looking at, what it will allow you is after 2 years or 3 years, the pension is vested. And it therefore means if you want to leave the public service after 5 years, you can take, your contributions. So there will be certain periods where if you make a certain minimum amount of time, whether it's 7 or 5, I don't have the exact time before me, right? But I think it's between 5 and 7. You can take the government's contribution, your contribution, and move to another employment, and your pension, you take your pension with you, and therefore you can continue that. Those are the kinds of inbuilt flexibility that we need to have to make sure that our persons are financially viable, both during the period when they're working and post the pension period. But we are going to be coming to the public to explain more of what this involves. What we're hoping here to do is not just for government workers. We want to be able to spread this across all of the statutory bodies as well. Because there's some statutory bodies that do not have pensions or do not have appropriate pensions, where the pension scheme is just like the existing one with the government, funded only by the statutory body, right? And you see, you have the same challenges again. So we want to make sure that as much as possible that all of the state employees, including those in the statutory bodies, are put in a position where they can actually have a pension that they contribute to, the government contributes to. It's managed by an independent board of trustees comprising of government representatives or the statutory bodies representatives and the employees representatives or the unions, as the case might be, and with people who understand investing, so that they can help the funds be properly invested, and the funds can then be, you can have gaffing, having oversight of how the funds are invested and used.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And you mentioned statutory bodies. One of the issues with the gravel and concrete is the lack of appointment of a board member representing the workers. That's what the union articulated. Do you have an update for them on that issue there?
Well, I don't have an update on that, and I think I have to, in a sense, I think this issue predates me, and it's lingered a bit. I don't know whether in law there's a mandatory requirement for that, or whether it's just been the practice. And I think there might be some concerns over whether or not sometimes you have confidentiality issues or conflict of interest issues when you have an actual union representative on the board. But it is something that I'm open to having a proper discussion on, and then probably just having the matter resolved one way or the other.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Final question, and then we get to closing comments from you. Now, the leader of the opposition and other elements of civil society have accused your government, sir, of using the Grenada Development Bank, to facilitate the financing of personal loans for certain government ministers. Is that an accusation that has come your way? Is that something that you have heard or have had discussion on?
Well, I'll be very straight on this, right? As far as I'm aware, Minister Williams has been a customer of the Grenada Development Bank pre his involvement in public life. That's factual, that's clear. And his relationship with the bank has continued. The bank and my government are not using the bank to finance the personal loans of any ministers. And I've said this specifically in relation in the case of Minister Williams, because I know, and I think the public knows, and bank officials will know, that Minister Williams was in fact doing business with the bank long before he got into public life, and he would have continued his business arrangements with the bank, would have continued post that. And that's the only issue I am aware of in terms of the bank having an actual relationship with the bank. But I want to make the point here. the Grenada Development Bank does business with the citizens of Grenada. A politician or a public official is also a citizen of Grenada. And if that politician or citizen or public official meets the bank's criteria for financial services from the bank, that citizen, that public official, that politician, in my view, is entitled to have access to the bank services like any other citizen of Grenada. And as people would say, if you live in a glass house, you shouldn't throw stones. So the other side is in no position to talk about those issues, and I will leave it there.
Well, you went there. You didn't say don't go there in this case. Prime Minister, over to you, sir. There are several other issues that we wanted to address, but certainly we will channel those through your press secretary, who I would like to compliment publicly for being very competent in her communication with the Bubb Report. So, Prime Minister, over to you, sir, for some closing comments.
Well, first of all, Chelon, let me say thank you for giving me the opportunity to be on your esteemed show. I want to say to the citizens, both at home and in the diaspora, thank you for giving us the opportunity to form the government and to be of service to the nation. On my own personal behalf, on behalf of the Cabinet of Grenada, we commit to continuing working hard on behalf of the citizens. We continue to commit to being available and accessible through our town halls, through our constituency offices, through as much as we can using social media to engage with you, to hear your views, to be able to respond to them as best we can. I certainly want to take the opportunity, as we are in our 50th anniversary of independence, to thank all of the Grenadians who've made this Golden Jubilee a remarkable success, from the team who planned it, Dr. Grenade, Mrs. Gail Purcell, and others at the Secretariat, the Cabinet Secretary. They've done a lot of work and are continuing to do a lot of work during this Golden Jubilee. There's still some outstanding features that we intend to treat with. For instance, the rollout of the $50 note, which we hope will happen in July. We're hoping to do it in June, but we've had some challenges that didn't allow us to meet that timeline. But it's something to look forward to as a keepsake, I think, of tremendous value. And, you know, one of the things that has stayed with me in the last year in particular, Dr. Bubb, is the fact that many Grenadians at home and abroad have expressed their joy, pride, and exhilaration and patriotism, crucially, about just being happy to be a Grenadian, being proud to be a Grenadian. And I thank them for those expressions. We want to continue making them proud to be Grenadian and encouraging them to actually be part of that process of nation building, whether it's in Grenada or outside of Grenada. So thank you very much.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, Prime Minister. And again, as my former history teacher, and we both come from the school of Mr. Ali Gill, I'm sure you're making our alma mater very proud. So it's good to have you again, sir.
Thank you. And enjoy the rest of Sunday.
Absolutely, Honorable Prime Minister. Viewers and listeners, we just concluded our conversation with Grenada's Prime Minister, the Honorable Dickon Mitchell, his second conversation here on the Bubb Report as Prime Minister, but his fourth on the Bubb Report. His predecessor is yet to appear on the Bubb Report. We do await his appearance on the Bubb Report at some point in the future. On behalf of my hardworking and competent producers, I say to all of you, thank you for tuning in and have a wonderful day. Take care. Bye-bye.
Don't go there.
You are a technocrat. I mean, you can speak to whether or not it was appropriate or inappropriate for that to occur. Would you have done that as a permanent secretary?
Politicians get the information from wherever source that they can.
That's going to be the extent of your answer.
Yeah.
Don't go there.
There's a lot of noise around the data protection bill that, in my respectful view, is not warranted.
I was one of those making noise, and it's simply because I was concerned about that specific Section 33.
Don't go there.
Are you going to be offering yourself up as political leader of the party?
I see you've called me here for much more than diplomatic passports. I don't mind that.
Don't go there.
What is the relationship like between you and your leader, Dr. Mitchell, your boss, Dr. Mitchell?
I'm not sure how to explain how to answer this question at this time. I prefer not to answer.
Don't go there.
They said that you approached the bank for the loan before the election and that it only materialized after the election. there are also conflicting reports around the quantity of monies that were received. What is the reality here?
People try to extort the truth and to make all kinds of things about it. I just stay quiet. So if you notice, I was really and truly quiet about the whole matter.
Well, except with not with the New Today newspaper. The New Today newspaper reported on this, so I'm not too sure you were quiet on this. Go ahead, Honorable. Go ahead.
Well, I'm just trying to answer your question, right?
Don't go there.
I think we just spoke at length about the regularization framework. So
yes, we did. But let us talk, Prime Minister. Let us talk about the workers who are dismissed.
The Bubb Report. We go there.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for checking out the Bubb Report's social media pages. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch our weekly live show, follow our Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram pages, and also subscribe to our YouTube channel. You can catch repeat episodes on Wednesdays at 4 and 5 p.m. respectively on CRFM Radio and GBN TV in Grenada.